Hey guys, hey ladies, hey friends, hey foes. We just wanted to take a second to remind you that while we're okay swearing when little ears are listening, you might not be, and that's okay. So here's your chance to pause us and wait for nap time, or pop in your earbuds. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Me in the straight jacket. 'Cause I'm a criminal. I need some medication. I'm hearing voices. I'm making bad choices.
Welcome back to another episode of Jen Playing by the Rules. My name's Jenelle.
And I'm Jenna.
We were just catching up because we miss each other and we haven't seen each other. Sorry, I have a little cold if I sound sniffly. This episode is going to be about ADHD in adults before we catch up, but we're going to do a digging deeper if you guys want about children in the future, because I feel like Jenna and I both feel like they're just such different topics, even though they're in the same like neurodivergent category. Kids
Good
and
word.
adults. They looked it up last night. Oh, I was like, is eight or I was on TikTok last night for a long time. How many TikToks did you get last night?
I loved it.
On a Sunday, a good TikTok is so fun. But it said that ADHD was neurodivergent last night, so that's the only reason I know it.
I like that.
But it's such a different topic for kids and adults. And before we get into anything, I also want to say, since I'm brand new to this, I want to say that we treat all differences with the utmost respect, whether they're racial, political, whatever, neurodivergent, mental illness, gender fluidity. Like, we want everyone to know that we love everyone equally here. And so if I speak improperly or term something improperly, just know that I'm brand new here. I really wanted to take a second as a disclaimer at the beginning. Like, if you're someone that struggled with ADHD for your whole life, or any neurodivergent for your whole life, or your kids for your whole life, like, I'm brand new. So if I say something incorrectly, please feel free to correct me, because I'm going to need a lot of correcting, because I'm literally been in this space for a month. So
Yeah, I mean, we're learning
no
along
disrespect
with you guys that are new to this. So
I know, but I just would hate to say something and be like, like make flippant of something that someone's like, I struggled with that for 7 years and you're an asshole and I can't take it. Like, we get it. Like, we've struggled with all the illnesses. And so I would hate if somebody was like, yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
Mental illness was like when someone's like, I don't need medication for mental illness. I just pulled myself up by the bootstraps. Like,
Yeah.
we're not those people. I promise.
Yeah.
I'm on my first medication of probably many. And so if I sound like I got it all figured out, I don't. I know I don't. I'm going to adjust my whole life.
Yeah. I mean, that's with everything, I think, like anxiety, depression, we think we have it figured out, and then like something throws us for a loop, or
oh my gosh,
we
that's
age
exactly
and our
where
bodies change.
Our
so.
hormones say, hey girl, hey,
Yep.
this ain't gonna, Zoloft ain't for you anymore. That's entry league. Like,
Yep.
let's lift it up. Okay, but first of all, what have you been doing? Because Jenna had the cutest last week, and you have to
yeah.
share pictures on the
forgot.
Instagram page when we share this episode.
So we decided that we were going to foster some puppies because we adopted a puppy during COVID. We said, COVID's not going anywhere. Let's go ahead and adopt this puppy that we've talked about. Our other dog is going on 10. So it was a good time for us. So we adopted a puppy. However, since we RV and we travel and we homeschool, we knew 2 was our max. Like, we can't handle more than that. And
you
2
with
dogs.
Kids, you with dogs.
Yes, kids and dogs at this point.
Yes, 2 is just it.
We're good. But we said, during the months when we're home, like, we do want to help out. And so we know that shelters are full. A lot of people have gone back to work or back to school and said a dog actually wasn't right for our family, or a puppy, or we don't have the time. So the shelters around us were over full, or people didn't get their dog spayed or neutered for whatever reason. And there were so many pregnant dogs in shelters, puppies. So we said, we have the availability. Let's foster. And we're home right now. So we fostered, it was a litter of 9, and we fostered 3. Oh my gosh, they were the sweetest babies. It was like having newborns. There was very little sleep between excited kids wanting to see the puppies each morning and puppies getting used to being separated from mom and getting used to a new house. But it was so many puppy cuddles. And my daughter also turned 4 during the time that we fostered. And before we had fostered, she said she wanted a puppy party. So I was mom of the year and literally had 3 foster puppies at her puppy party. So it was
And
great.
it was the cutest party ever. Jenna had
Fun.
the kid like got little like dog bowls and they were eating their food out of puppy bowl. It was to die for. Like
Yep.
you didn't even mean to be as over the top. This was like
Oh, I
Pinterest
did.
worthy, mom.
Well, and
Okay.
it
I
was
was like,
like
holy shit.
we don't do birthday parties until our kids ask for them, like in terms of other
friends.
kids and friends. Yeah. And so my grandma came in, my in-laws came over for a bit. And so we just did, my kids each adopted, I did that in air quotes, which you can't see, a puppy. And so it was like a little stuffed toy that they got to adopt, and they made leashes and collars and named it and gave it a checkup. And it was so much fun. So
That's probably gonna be their best. I guarantee Peyton remembers this as one of her best birthdays when she's a grown up.
I hope so. And my son loved it because he got to do all the activities and adopt a puppy, and they made little beds for them and blankets, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh. And you have a 4-year-old baby.
I know. But she's like, I'm not going to be 4. I want to be 3 forever because I want to be little. And I showed her a picture from when she was a newborn, and she was a tiny little thing. And she's like, I'm still that small. I was like, okay, honey.
Mikey turned 5. So we both had birthday kids. And Mikey drank out of the Fountain of Youth in St. Augustine and then proceeded to turn 5 and was furious that the Fountain of Youth didn't work. So bad.
So
woke
cute.
up on his 5th birthday and was like, what was even in that water then? I still turned 5. And I was like, I think it's more of like I was trying to explain like a metaphor to him. Like I was like, I think it's just going to keep you like youthful inside and healthy inside like you're 4.
It's
and
your
he's
mentality.
like, nope. Fountain of Youth, like he's so literal, and he was just like very angry that the Fountain of Youth failed to deliver. So St. Augustine, you're gonna get an angry Yelp review from Mikey Borgstrom.
That is adorable. That is adorable.
The cutest. Okay. What else do we have anything else you want to cover before we start?
I think we're good.
Okay, welcome to Jenelle's ADHD journey. If you all didn't already give me the diagnosis yourself just by listening, here you go. You have been validated.
Yep.
So I'm going to do a quick rundown of like how we got here, and then we'll do like kind of diagnosis, and then we'll do like present time because I'm like 6 or 8 weeks out from starting medication.
Is it already that long?
I know. I didn't know that either until I was in Florida, and I'm on my like 2nd refill 2 weeks in, and I was like, okay. But I have to talk to her like every 2 weeks because we'll get there. We'll get there. Everybody has different options and medications, and mine is less intrusive, but still a lot. Okay, let me go to my notes now, because now that I'm medicated, I take notes on things like Jenna. Okay, so this kind of starts with, let's go back to like, so after my dad died, my depression really ramped up. I was working with a great OBGYN in Richmond, if you ever need a recommendation, and he was my medication management provider. And so I called him and was like, listen, my depression is like tanked. And so we just stripped the meds I was on and put me on new meds. So, but around the same time I was diagnosed with PMDD. My meds get stripped. I'm on Zoloft at that time, like, I don't know, the 2nd or 3rd from lowest amount. Because you always start on like, let's say it's lowest is 10. So I'm probably on 20 or 30 at this time. Or if it's 1, I'm on 2 or 3 mgs. So we strip it, and I'm start on Xanax and Prozac. I believe the Prozac is for PMDD. Also, side note, go ahead.
Remind people what PMDD, if they haven't listened to that.
Yes, PMDD,
we didn't know before.
Premenstrual Dysphoric disorder. And we've had 1 or 2 listeners write in and say they got diagnosed after listening to the episode and are on medication now because no one knew what it was. So premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And I think the episode should still be there. It's probably labeled PMDD. And I think everyone, just if you're feeling like intense feelings of rage or anxiety around your menstrual cycle, it can be before or after, if I'm not mistaken. So don't be tricked by the pre. It's kind of like when you say postnatal depression, you can also have it while you're pregnant. So like it's just in the vicinity. So I changed all my medication then. We moved to Chicago and we do an episode with Virginia, and Virginia recommends art therapy, like up and down. So I'm like, I'm going to try art therapy. I've never tried anything like this. So thank you, Virginia, for hooking us up with art therapy. Art therapy ends up being just regular therapy because I'm such a bad artist that my therapist can't even like work with me at that point. Like I draw a few pictures and we're both just like, this is awkward for everyone. But luckily, my art therapist happens to be highly trained in diagnosing children and adults with ADHD because she primarily works with children, but she said she's actually working with more adults now, which I thought was interesting. But she said she is seeing so many people get diagnosed in their 40s, especially women with ADHD, because we have just coped so well our whole lives. So I listened to a podcast 18 months ago, and it was a comedy podcast, and I'll link it up. It's Whiskey Ginger, hosted by Andrew Santino. And NIKKI GLASER, who I love, is like my favorite comedian, was a guest on the show. And she was talking about how she had been bouncing around antidepressant and anti-anxiety medicine her whole life. And she was self-medicating with other things. And then when she got diagnosed with ADHD, like her whole life changed. And so that was 18 months ago. And I'm like, it's in the back of my mind. And I'm like, God, I just can never get my medication right. Like I'm just always still anxious, or I'm always still depressed. I don't know what the problem is. So then fast forward to here, 18 months later, I'm talking about my dad in art therapy. And I'm saying like, he never stopped going. He was never tired. Like he had so much energy. His leg was always bouncing. And if we were in a movie theater with him, we'd put our hand on his leg so he'd stop, because he was so big, he would bounce the whole movie theater row with his leg. So if you sat next to dad at the movie theater, your job was to put your hand on his leg when he started shaking the whole row. And she was like, did your dad have ADHD? And I was like, oh my God. And like all these visions started like flooding in of like my dad's jeans all had holes in the thighs from him rubbing his hands on them, like literally just rubbed his hands through the tops of his jeans.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, he never stopped going. He was never tired. I mean, he'd like take naps places like dads do, but like he would be happy to be gone from morning till night. He loved being out and doing things and was loud. And like, I just was like, oh my goodness. And so I came home and talked to Josh, and I was like, Josh, do you think my dad had ADHD? And he was like, totally. And I was like, what? And then I was like, my therapist said that some of the things that I've been saying sound like I should be evaluated for ADHD. And he's like, I totally could see that. And so luckily it was at a point in the pandemic when like psychiatrists became available on Psychology Today. So I went on Psychology Today, luckily booked an appointment like 2 days later, got on with the psychiatrist. We just talked kind of about my med management. And then the next, she was like, your anxiety is uncontrolled right now, so we can't test you and diagnose you with ADHD until your anxiety and your medication is under control. So we spent like a month and a half getting my meds under control to where my anxiety felt manageable. And then she tested me for ADHD. And before like the test was even done, she was basically like, you're done. Like what, let's talk drugs. Like, do you want to be on drugs? Do you not want to be on drugs? There's
so
different
it was
testing.
two appointments total?
So I had an appointment to get my anxiety I think I had 2 appointments to get my anxiety medications dialed in. So I think I upped one of them, and then 2 appointments of evaluation for ADHD. But I think it was only one like real appointment. It was like appointment to talk about like, oh, your anxiety is well managed. Okay, at the next appointment, let's talk about evaluating ADHD. So that's something that's kind of a tricky hoop to jump through. She would not talk about diagnosis unless my anxiety and depression were medicated correctly, which is honestly, it's a hard bridge to get across to start with. I just didn't let myself get so deep that it was a hard thing to do.
That's interesting.
Okay.
I want to touch on your dad one, because the way you described your dad, I don't think I would necessarily describe you. So your dad sounds more like from what I've learned with dealing with a child with possible ADHD, we're in the process of getting it all figured out, is there are different types of ADHD, and there's inattention and hyperactivity. And it sounds like your dad maybe had the more hyperactivity. Couldn't sit still, always fidgeting. But then there's also the inattention part. And I think that sometimes, and you can have combination, you can have both. And I think sometimes that's the one that gets overlooked, because you picture this, like you said, your dad, like couldn't sit still, always moving, always fidgeting. And that's not always the case.
I know. And it's,
and
like,
I would say
always,
with you, did they tell you what yours was?
I'm more hyperactive too.
Okay. See, I thought you'd be more inattentive, because I feel like you do have somewhat of a calm presence about you. Like I know some people with ADHD and it just feels sometimes like
Electric. Yeah.
yeah, and they can't settle down and they almost make you nervous because they're
Yeah.
so go, 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 or you feel like they're not listening because they're doing 50 other things with their
Yes. Oh
hands.
my gosh. I
But I
know
feel like
that
you
too.
have such a calming presence that I'm actually
Yeah.
surprised. I thought you would be more like in attention
Yeah, I'm not
or
bouncy and I'm not like, I can't get bored. I don't let myself get bored. And it also is just, mine is weird because, and I always ignored the ADHD because I was like, I don't have like, I'm not attention deficit. But like when I am, now that I'm on medication, I'm like, oh yeah, I was attention. Like I could not really sit down and like edit this podcast and just like focus on that. I do like 10 minutes of editing, 10 minutes of something else, 10
yeah.
minutes of editing, 10 minutes of something else. So now that I'm medicated, I see that a little bit more. But the hyperactivity I describe as like my brain feels
Mm,
like you see the body of someone with like my
okay.
brain feels like it's electrified all the time. And
Mhm.
so slowing down my brain was painful to me, or like sitting quietly was painful to me, or letting Josh finish a story that I had deemed boring was physically painful to me.
Mhm.
So I think my hyperactivity is just my brain fires really fast, where my body can kind of stay calm, but I don't
Mhm.
like to stop moving ever either. So a big part of it was like, it's hard for me to sit through a TV show. I will frequent, like last night, I was like, I'd rather watch Euphoria on the treadmill than sit on the couch because
Mhm.
like it's just hard for me to like shut down. But yes, I agree with you. Is like my typical impression of the HD side of the ADHD is my dad, like the person
Okay.
that like you're
Right.
feeling their energy all the time.
Yeah. And then
But my
that's
dad could sit calmly too. And so it's like
okay.
there's so many facets to it. I guarantee you're gonna know even more about this than me because when you
We'll
go through
see.
like when you go
Yeah.
through child testing, you learn all the facets of it. Mine was just kind of like,
Mhm.
you're higher on the HD here. What do you want to do? Because
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
let's just get you treated. Where kids, I think they're going to teach you a lot more coping mechanisms. I'm an old
Mhm.
dog, so there's no teaching me like new tricks. It's just
Yeah.
like manage it.
Well, and it's interesting because when you were just describing your brain and your body, like to me, that's anxiety. And so it's
Yes,
such a
that's why it gets
hard thing.
missed.
Yeah. So like I feel like with my brain, like it never shuts off. And I've
Yeah.
been like that my whole life. And I always have like a running list and what I call like ping pong brain. I'm the same way. Like if I'm cleaning the house, I can't dust the whole house. I have to dust a little and then I have to run and do something else. I can't do one activity for a long amount of time or a single activity. And I've always said that's anxiety. So this is interesting to hear because there could be more with some people
Yes.
who have been
It
labeled
runs
as
in
anxious.
families also, sorry to say.
Right?
That's what started it, was talking about my dad, and then we started talking about me, and I was like, oh no. And she's like, it runs in families. And I was like, I've never heard that.
And did she tell you, which we've heard, that a lot of times with ADHD, there are other things that go hand in hand with it? Not
Yeah.
always, but more
Yeah.
times than not. Like we are seeking out testing for dyslexia currently as well. She mentioned anxiety and depression were big on the ADHD scale as well, which my son luckily didn't have any. We had to fill out like a paperwork, so he didn't
Yeah.
score any on those, as well as like behavioral defiance disorder. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting. So you still are diagnosed with anxiety,
But see,
depression.
here's the interesting part is like, is it the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Ezra doesn't have anxiety or depression right now because he didn't like, I hypothetically, I spent my whole life wondering what was wrong with me
Mm-hmm.
and trying to medicate as best I knew how, whether it be self-medication or drugs through the doctor. And I've always known something was wrong with my brain. So did
Mm-hmm.
that cause anxiety and depression?
Or could it be a missing puzzle piece? You've had
I
all
know.
three, you
Yes,
know?
the whole time. Or I just
Yeah.
had no idea I had ADHD this whole time. And like, who knows what would have been different had my brain just been told, which is why I'm such a proponent for kids getting tested. Because even
Mm-hmm.
if you don't want your kids on medication or you don't want them late, quote unquote, labeled, which I don't think we're really doing anymore, which is a big part of the reason we're talking about this. I don't think there should be labels with mental health and there shouldn't be labels with, oh my gosh, you have ADHD or oh my gosh, you got COVID. I know some people are not talking about that they got
Mm-hmm.
like I got COVID, my family got COVID. Like we're not going to label these things because like people shouldn't be hiding out feeling bad about something that
Yeah.
happens. And so I think that attaching a label is only attaching a label that helps give you better care instructions is how I
Right.
like to think about it. Like it's the label on your fancy shirt that says dry clean only. Like let's get better care instructions for children and not call it getting a label, but call it getting the tools to help children so they don't end up 37 fucking years old finding out that they have ADHD through talking about their dad at art therapy after upping all their medications.
Yeah. Which I think is something we'll get into a lot more with the kid one.
Yep.
Because there are pros and cons to this whole labeling. And then there's a lot that goes
and Jenna
into
was
it.
a school teacher, so she could speak from both sides of it. And she's now a mom. And so that's why it's a whole different topic and that's one thing that my psychiatrist said to me that I told my art therapist that I took offense to. And so this is going to be a sensitive topic, so we're probably going to get corrections to this, but like here's my correction to my psychiatrist, who I love. She was like, well, you stay home and you don't have a job, so like do you really need medication? And I was like, cute. Yeah, no, I still want to live like a functional life, even though I don't have a job. Thank you for checking in though.
Right. I don't know exactly. Like I know that my brain is not completely balanced. I call it a special brain. It's something I've struggled with my whole life, and I've struggled with different types of anxiety, different types of depression. And so I know if I had something, I would want it figured out. So for example, I had anxiety a lot this week and I couldn't pinpoint why. And so last night I have this, if you haven't heard of it, it's called a Whoop band. My husband was big on it. He got an upgrade, so I'm trying out his old one. It tracks your sleep disturbances. Last night I had 16 sleep disturbances and I had nightmares all night. And I know it's because I had anxiety all week. And I just had think about the worst thing that you could think happening to your kids, your family, yourself.
No.
And like that's the type of dreams.
It was awful. Oh.
And so it's like, yes, medication sometimes is the route that people need to go, because you might look fine and functional and say, okay, you can perform your job well, but are you living your best life mentally is the issue.
Yes, that's the big thing. And I was
always the case.
And here's the thing, guess what? I don't have a job, but guess how many times I've yelled at my kids during homeschool since I've been medicated? Maybe one.
Yep.
The average of me. So I'm a better teacher now. So tell me that that's not important, that I'm not yelling at my kid, because the overstimulation in my brain, plus the overstimulation of trying to teach two little kids, plus the overstimulation of everyone touching, plus the overstimulation of all the noise was like so engulfing that I felt like I couldn't like breathe sometimes.
Right.
And now like I've taken my brain chaos out of it. I'm just like, they're being that kind of annoying. Like, come on, guys, we're never going to get done with school. Like, that is the homeschool teacher that I want my kids to remember. So yeah, maybe I don't have like an important job, but like also I don't want my kids to remember me screaming at them at homeschool. Well,
you do have an important job.
I'm overstimulated, not to a psychiatrist.
Yeah, that's true. But I do want to say, it's kind of interesting that you mention all of this, because a mutual friend of ours was like, I think I mentioned that we were testing my son, and she was like, yeah, one of my good friends just got tested for ADHD and diagnosed and is on a medication. And I was like, yeah, Jenelle. And she was like, oh no. She was like, another friend. And I was like,
oh my God.
Like similar age. I think she said she's like almost 40. And I think I wanted maybe 36. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
And I was like laughing because I thought she was talking about you. And I was like, you mean our mutual friend? It was literally the same week that you got diagnosed. And isn't that crazy? So
my therapist said it. She's like, I am seeing skyrocketing numbers of 40-year-old, especially women, 30 to 40-year-old, especially women, because women typically, and we don't like to like gender role here. And we understand gender fluidity. Like women typically are, they like the big joke is like, were you a quote unquote pleasure to have in class? Congratulations, you're an adult with an anxiety disorder now. Like girls are taught to hide it in our generation. I think now it's a lot different. In the 80s and 90s and 2000s, we're so good at just blending it away. And now that we're like fully loud, independent adults with like, I'm
Mhm.
very lucky I have a very supportive partner in all of this. I can act my fully authentic self. Like it's fully obvious. I don't know if
Yeah.
my dad was ever to be able to be fully obvious because he ran a really successful business and probably couldn't be who he wanted
Mhm.
to be all the time, but he got it out in motorcycling and he got it out in like adrenaline type situations.
Right.
And so it's huge. And that's why we're talking about it on here. Cause I don't want to be like, I have ADHD. Let's talk about my weird journey. Like this is very relevant to people in our age range. And so if we
Yeah.
help 2 people with PMDD episode, go back and listen to it. Maybe we can help 2 people with the ADHD adult episode too.
And I tell people to really do your research if
Yes.
you think you or your child struggle with it, because
Yes.
statistically, not always, if you look up symptoms based on gender, there is
Ooh.
usually a difference, especially for young children.
I
So
didn't
even if
know
you don't think
this.
your child is like a people pleaser and trying to hide it, they might struggle more from the inattentive versus the
Yeah.
hyperactivity. And
Yeah.
unless you know exactly what's going on in their brain, you might not fully
It's
be
true.
aware. And my son is nonstop go, but he struggles more with the inattentive part. And so
Yeah.
he looks like he's listening and he looks like he's absorbing what you're saying, but he says he plays movies in his brain and he's not absorbing anything. He
I
can't
love
even
that.
tell you what I just said. And
Yeah.
so, and that's common with girls too.
Yeah.
And so,
Yes.
just be really aware of it's not what we pictured. Like I remember in school, there was a boy and he was just labeled as like a problem child. And he was your typical ADHD kid. He
Mm-hmm.
was messy. Everything was falling out of his desk. The teacher had to put like a square on the floor because he couldn't sit still. And so he had to just
Yeah.
stay in the square so he didn't disturb others.
Oh.
He had to like bounce in his seat, like very classical, what you would picture.
Mm-hmm.
However, there were other kids, I am 99% sure, that struggled that looked like you're
They had their shit
neurotypical
together.
and
Yeah.
everything was,
Yeah.
but they didn't in their brain. So
Oh my
so
God. It's
look at
totally.
based on gender. It's a
It
big
is
thing.
interesting too, because I didn't think about all of that. And I just love the idea of Ezra, because I have had so many times where I've got down in your son and talked to him eye to eye. And I'm like, I hope he was listening. I hope he was watching a good movie while I was
I
talking to
know.
him, because I just love him so much that I want his movie experience to be great.
Yeah.
while
And
I'm talking to
he'll
him.
even do this thing where he repeats what you say to
Yes.
him.
Yes.
So like if we're doing math and I'm like, okay, what's 5 plus 3? And instead of just giving me the quick answer, like 8, he'll go 5 plus 3, 5 plus 3.
He's watching the
5
movie
plus
while he's
3.
saying
And so
5 plus
he's
3.
verbally saying
Yeah.
to where it looks like, and that's one of his coping mechanisms, to where it looks
Yeah.
like he's paying attention, but his
Mhm.
brain isn't yet working to
Mhm.
solve the problem. And he knows his math facts. And when he's focused in, he can do
Yeah.
them quickly. And so that's something that I've really started to notice. And he did it to the
Yeah.
doctor. And she was just kind of like, okay. And I was like, no, the thing is like, he knows this and he's just, this is what he does. And
He
she was like,
super
okay.
knows this. You're
Yeah.
asking him 1 plus 1. He
Yeah.
super knows this.
But he'll
This
sit
isn't a
there and just
question.
repeat it because
Yes.
it's his coping mechanism. He learned like, I'm not going to get in trouble if it looks like I'm paying attention.
You
So-
don't. And I do the same thing. And like, honestly, like I am so much more attentive to what Josh is talking about now that I'm medicated. But like before, when you're a grown up, you don't watch a movie, you start making lists in your head. So
Yeah.
Josh starts a story, he's 2 sentences in, and I'm like, I can already tell this is not going to be interesting to me. So I fully like leave my body and like start working on lists in my head. Or sometimes I'll be like, what should I wear to dinner next weekend? And I'll just like, I'm watching my own movie in my head. I can't tell you the number of times I've thought about what I want to wear to something, because that's just
so
like
funny.
easier. And so then I just sit there and shake my head and nod
Mhm.
along, and I'm like, interesting. And he doesn't notice. And so I'm doing what Ezra's doing,
Yes.
and I've fully left the room. Like
Yeah.
I'm in another place.
And now he's just told you that you're moving back to Richmond and you're just like, so jeans
I think
skirt?
I'd click into that story, I feel like. But yes, most of them are like, okay, I don't know Todd from accounting. I'm sorry, what? Okay, so here's the other thing that made me nervous. So now we're diagnosed. We have our diagnosis.
Yep.
So now we're talking drugs. I don't need drugs because I don't have a real job. Sorry, that's off. So we X that off right away. I'm like, no, but here I said to her, I said, I have a strong family history of addiction. I don't like to play around with things. I don't want to take anything I'm going to be addicted to. So we all think of like the naughty, quote unquote, naughty. I always we
Adderall.
call them, yeah, naughty Adderall, or remember Ritalin was the big
Mm-hmm.
guy, which if that is what your brain needs, that is what your brain needs. I was terrified of going on something with any addictive properties. And so luckily there's a new drug called Strattera, which I will look up the generic name. I want to say it's like amoxetine. I think that's right. ADHD brain just remembered my generic version of my drug. And so it is non-stimulant and it is an ADHD medication and it is a delight. Side effects are, I think, like sleep disturbances. I was really tired for like the first couple weeks. I took it like at 2:00 every day, but I was also post COVID at that point. And so she was like, we can't tell if, I mean, it's not an uncommon side effect, but could also be the COVID. And then so really tired. And then disinterest in food, I'm still struggling with a little bit. I'm eating a normal amount, but food doesn't sound as good to me. Also could be post-COVID. And so
Yeah.
you're supposed to get you're only supposed to lose your appetite for like 2 weeks on this one, which I know a lot of people are like, yay, Adderall will make me skinny. Like I wasn't going for that. I wanted to just make sure I was being very safe. So you're supposed to have some appetite disruptions and some tiredness for the first couple of weeks. Obviously you can look up your own side effects on the Google, but I was really thrilled, which I had no idea that I was terrified to ever get tested because I didn't want to go on a stimulant because I just felt like it wasn't a good fit. And so there are non-stimulant versions. It's not as controlled. It's a little bit easier. Like I ordered it while I was in Florida, which a lot of my drugs, like I can't just pass my Xanax from state to state. It's a way more controlled substance. And so this Strattera is a less controlled substance, which is nice. So I ran out in Florida and was able to order it there. Luckily, I really like it. I'm only a month in. So as we all know, like I'm on the like honeymoon phase of like, yeah, I have a new drug that's working. I'm probably going to have to change it 20 times. I'm very diligent about this stuff. I mean, going forward, I will keep working with my therapist who also has specialties working with diagnosing adults and children with ADHD. And then I have to, the other thing you have to buy into here is you have to meet with your psychiatrist kind of a lot. Whenever you're on new medications, they want to manage you really well. And so that is a financial thing you have to be aware of. And I feel fortunate. I meet with her every 2 to 4 weeks right now, just because I was so tired at the beginning that I was like, I can't be this tired all the time. And then she's like, I think it's COVID. Yeah. And then I was better. And then I think we meet in a month now. And then I'll have to meet with her, I think, every month to get refills. I'm not really sure. I'm so new, but the difference it has made in my life, what I've really noticed is the difference in my mood, my behavior. The one thing that I will say, okay, so TMI, if you're like a family member or relative listening, please pause. I'm going to give you like 3, 2, 1 to like skip over the next 15 seconds. It takes me a little bit longer to orgasm. The end. But it's getting better. But my sex drive is way up, which is also interesting. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that my brain was always so busy and chaotic before that I was like, oh, the last thing I can handle is like slowing down and doing something for 15 minutes. But I am curious about the sexual side effect of, and it still happens.
And that's a question I have because if you're on an antidepressant, that usually takes it away. So does this one, that would be interesting if that's a side effect, like it ups that. So it kind of balances it out. I'm going to have to find out because I haven't researched it enough, but it takes a lot longer to reach there, but it still happens and it still is good, which is always a concern of mine when taking a medication. Well, yeah, and that's with any.
But I am curious why the drive is up, but the length of time is.
It could just be all of those mixing in your body,
working together. Yeah, I mean it's still happening, so I don't think that there's like major sexual side effects, but I'm interested to read more about it.
So I have a question about your medication. I don't know a ton about medications, but I do know some friends that say they have to take it at the same time each day. And I don't remember what the time frame is, like prior to when they start their productivity for the day. And then it wears off at a certain time each night. Or is yours one that's just like stays in your bloodstream? I
don't even know that because I haven't had enough time to pay attention to it. I definitely know when I've forgotten to take it. And so
Okay.
I don't know if I've Marco Polo'd a couple of our girlfriends and been like, oh shit, I forgot to take my ADHD medicine. I forgot to take it before I went to the eye doctor the other day. And I was like,
So did you take it then when you got home?
yes.
Could you sleep that night?
Interesting. I wonder if that was the night I couldn't sleep. There was a night this week I could not sleep, and Josh was like, what the I'm gonna have to look
Yeah.
into it because it's
I just have a
non-stimulant, so it
friend.
shouldn't affect it.
I don't know. I have a friend who her son is newly on medication and he has to take it before school. And I can't remember how many hours it lasts for. And one day, and she's a teacher as well. And so she's at school with her kid and she realized she forgot to give it to him. So she gave it to him later. And then he couldn't sleep that night. And he was up until
Interesting.
like, I think she said like midnight or 1. And she was like, I'll never make that mistake again. Like, I'll just have to say, like, we'll take it tomorrow because now he's like on lack of sleep. So
God, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, kids are a whole different animal. And I definitely know that the number one thing that I noticed, provided it wasn't COVID, which I don't think all of that could have been COVID, was the sleep was weird. I need less hours of sleep and can wake up more refreshed now, I've noticed. Like I don't feel like dead in the morning. And so I'm wondering if like my ADHD was intruding into my sleep.
yeah.
So mine must work long. I don't know, but like my sleep quality is dramatically improved for sure. And the amount of hours of sleep I need. And those like afternoon naps once the COVID part was over have really diminished. And I think I
Oh,
was getting
wow.
so tired in the afternoon because my brain was firing so hard all morning. And then
Yeah.
it would just like collapse because I was doing homeschool and then we'd work out and then we'd do everything. And by 2 o'clock, I was just like,
Done.
I can't. And
Yeah.
so I just have a much more stable energy base throughout the day and a much more stable mood throughout the day, which is
Interesting.
fucking what I wanted from
Yeah.
anxiety and depression medicine my whole life. And now
Right?
I'm finally getting it.
Are your siblings diagnosed or anything?
So they aren't. They could be tested. This would probably be a precursor, and it'll be something that I watch for in my own kids too, which is a big part of it. Like I always am a proponent of testing things so that you have other people. But I think that it is something that I'll watch for more in my own kids because
Yeah.
of my diagnosis. And so that's why I always say, like, get tested and then tell the people around you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how many times have we talked about on this podcast, like, oh, so and so's aunt, uncle, Joe, everybody had this thing and never told anyone.
Right.
And now these people are like shocked by the
Mhm.
fact that they think they're the first one in the family and it's been going on for generations.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting is our pediatrician told us that a lot of the times, since it is something that travels along family lines, a medication that works for one family member usually works for the whole family. And it's something
No
with,
way.
I'll have to ask Brandon a little more. There's something kind of to it, like with your genetics. And so she was
That makes
asking
total
us,
sense.
yeah, so we do have a family history of it. And so she wants us to have the names of the medications that have worked and haven't worked on hand, just in case we ever decide that route. And she said it's not 100% foolproof, but that's a great starting off
It's
point
a great
because
yeah.
the ADHD medication list is extensive.
See, I didn't
And
even know that. I always just thought it was Ritalin or Adderall.
so she said a lot of the times, even if it's like more extended family, it will work further
This is
down the
so
line.
it makes
I
sense
was
if
like,
it's
that's interesting.
a genetic thing. Like it makes sense
Yeah.
that certain drugs work better for it.
And our pediatrician is very intelligent. And the way she described it was so beautiful, but I could never like replicate it. But yeah.
Do it. Try it. Try it.
And my husband loves genetics. And so they were just like chatting about it. And it was
Oh my
cool.
gosh.
So yeah. And she
Brandon's
was
our
like,
resident doctor.
yeah. And so she said if there's a family history, that's always their starting point with that type of
I had
medication.
no idea. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't want stimulants. I don't want
Yep.
stimulants. And she was like, well, there are other options. And I was like, there is?
I don't know. I feel like they don't use stimulants as much as they used to. But
I
could
didn't
be
want to
wrong.
research it at all because I didn't want to accidentally research like what the questions were because I wanted to have a
Oh.
very straightforward diagnosis. And sometimes I'll be like, hey, cheat sheet. Let's see what they're going to ask me. And then
Yeah.
I'll like be like, well, how would I answer it? Like I wanted her to just ask me straight out. And she was like, how often do you lose your glasses or your phone? And I was like, literally, it's a family joke. Like it was, and there was all these questions that like I hadn't really put any thought into, but she was like, how often do you this? How often do you that? And I was like, oh shit, like literally hundreds of times a day. I normally lose my phone. Oh my gosh, that's so weird. I just am not thinking of it now. Like normally I lose my phone probably 20 times a day. I don't I lose it maybe once a day now.
That's
like,
not normal. My family
it's
jokes that I lose my phone 99% of the
welcome.
day.
It was always our joke too that I had to have my watch because otherwise I can't find my phone because it pages my phone. And so when my watch
Yeah.
broke, they were like, well, how will you find your phone? And I was like, I'm fine. I have ADHD medicine now. I'll be fine.
See, our
But, like,
Alexa is hooked up to my phone because I lose it so much.
see, yes.
And
And I used
before
to
I had,
pay
like-
Zach.
Yeah, before I had the keyless, is that what they're called? The keyless keys? You know what I'm talking about? So now they
Fobs.
always just stay in my car.
Yes.
Before that, I mean, I had car keys
Oh my
that
God,
I still have
keys.
not found. Still have not
Keys are
found.
the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, the world is just changing to create an ADHD comfortable atmosphere because like
Right.
keys were the end of my life. I had to wear it on a
Yes.
lanyard around my neck in college
Okay.
and like never take it off.
Yeah, so I went out and it wasn't like because I was drinking, but I went out and my roommates
Just regular.
were going home and they knew that I always lost my keys. So they made me a lanyard with the key. And they were like, so that you don't wake us up.
So you don't wake us up where this is
Uh-huh.
definitely like my roommates wouldn't even lock the door because there was no
Yeah.
chance that I was going to get in with any
Oh, yeah.
form of like self responsibility. Like
That is
there
so
was just
funny.
it is. And I mean, I'm not saying like everyone go get tested for
Oh, yeah.
ADHD, but like read up on it, read what it means to be a 40-year-old with it. Watch, honestly, I learned a lot from TikTok where there's like some like neurodivergent ADHD corners of TikTok where they talk about it. Not all of it's going to apply to you. So if one thing doesn't apply to you, like Jenna said, there's such a wide spectrum of ADHD, like any neurodivergent thing, it's got a spectrum.
I'm also going to say that you've never aged yourself and you've been referring to yourself as a 40-year-old this whole episode. And I'm like,
you're
who is
welcome.
this woman?
Because I fucking gave up. I don't care anymore. Ha! No, I know I was so mad when we talked about this at a previous episode when the eye doctor was like, this usually affects women over 40. And I was like, well, I'm 37. And he was
Gotta
like,
round up now.
close enough, hoe.
Yep.
He didn't call me
I'm
hoe,
sure he
but
said
that's
those
what
exact words.
close enough, hoe. He's like the best cornea specialist in the state of Illinois. And he's like, close enough, hoe.
Yep.
But that's what I heard in my
Super
head.
professional.
So,
Yeah,
and
of
that's how
course.
that's how I told it to Josh. And that's how I'll tell it to everyone because
Yeah.
ADHD people love embellishing a story. And that is what I am known for. So-
Yeah, I love it. Well, thanks for informing us. And like we said, we'll do a kid one. Or do you have anything else?
If you have questions, I'm happy to answer, but like I'm also not an expert because I'm brand new. Go on Psychology Today and book an appointment with a psychiatrist.
Because kids, you can go to their pediatrician.
Mhm.
So it's just
pediatricians are just so much more
interesting.
all encompassing also.
Yeah.
And like they are trained in this, I think, where
Okay.
adults, 40-year-olds coming
That's
up
true.
with the ADHD is kind of a new thing. But Psychology Today is on Zoom. I did mine on Zoom like 2 days later. I started the process. And so it didn't feel like a long waiting period. And if you don't have it and you still feel chaotic, like your medication might need to be adjusted of your anxiety or your depression.
Or
I
there could
just
be
knew-
something else.
Yes. What
just
else?
a quick
like
note, my son is being tested for, we're trying to figure out exactly what. And dyslexia is something that we're kind of, and when I say dyslexia, I mean all that it could encompass. Like,
yes.
I know there's one specifically with numbers, the reading, and they've mentioned that kids or people with other learning differences could actually be misdiagnosed as having ADHD
Mhm.
because of how their brain is trying to process and work things through. So just because you get a no to this doesn't mean there might not be something else going on. And so keep
I know.
investigating and looking
Keep
into
investigating and keep an open mind and don't give away the clues is always my thing. Like make them dig. Like your pediatrician or whoever is testing Ezra is really good at digging and
Yeah.
like digging out the finer things.
And
like,
sometimes, unfortunately, especially as an adult, you have to do that for yourself. I mean, we know Google's not foolproof, but a lot of times you can find like
Yeah.
chat boards and blogs and people who have gone through similar things. And it
That's
just
true.
takes,
I didn't even think about
yeah,
that.
it just
That's
takes
brilliant.
the right keywords. And so
Yeah.
just keep searching and keep looking and hopefully you'll find your answers.
That's a
So,
really good point too, because I'm like not really on Facebook, but there is support boards for everything
mhm.
on Facebook, and so I just get my health advice from TikTok, like the young hipster that I am.
You are.
But I can't fuck with Facebook. It makes me just chaotic. But I think Jenna's right. Like as an adult, you do have to advocate for yourself. Where kids are more, you're advocating for your
Mhm.
kids, but their doctors are a little bit more onto this
Right.
than a 40-year-old. I'm so lucky. Virginia came on. I went to art therapy. My art therapist happens to specialize in this. Like I got really, 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 really lucky, but it's always been something in the back of my mind, but I was just too scared to follow through. And so I just wanted to dispel kind of all those myths right there. And also go back and listen to Virginia's episode. If you haven't, go back and listen to the PMDD episode. If you are new here, it might change your life because they have changed ours.
Or anxiety and depression. We got those too.
Oh, and then we're going to do we got some grief stuff coming up. We got kids ADHD. We got all the good stuff coming up. So message us topics. Oh, also, we're going to put this up on the Instagram, on the gram. Send us in your dating horror stories because we have had some requests to share like some of our worst dating stories. And we want to pepper in your guys's too, because honestly, your guys's are so much better than ours. Like the stories you guys send are incredibly amazing. And we'll keep you, just write anonymous at the top. We'll keep you anonymous. We'll give you a fake
Unless
name.
you want your name, I'm cool with it.
Unless you wanted to say your name. Yeah, because Jenna and I clearly would be like, say my social security number also, please, so people can know it's me.
And my address for fan mail.
Imagine like if we had filters, how hard this podcast would be. I'm like, here's my current OB report. Here it is. If you want to go into my web chart,
my social security on here with your husband. And I was like, please edit that out because he was trying to do some paperwork. And I literally said my social security number on here.
Oh my God. We've said it all on here. Like, what do you want to talk? Like, I'll give it to you. We don't care. So if you have topics you want us to talk about, let us know. I hope this was helpful to one person, even if no one gets tested or thinks they have ADHD. I just want you to know, like, my biggest takeaway from this is my whole life, I felt like no medication was ever going to work for me. And that's because I was treating just anxiety and depression. So no medication was ever going to fix me because I wasn't treating the whole problem. And this is the first time in my life. And I know I'm new and I'm in the honeymoon phase, but this is the first time in my life that I feel correctly medicated. And it is such a fucking, I don't want to say a blessing because I don't want to imply that like blessed and unblessed. I was reading a grief book last night that was like, don't say people are blessed and unblessed, but it is such a great feeling to feel correctly medicated for once at almost 40 years old.
I mean, you helped me. I'm going to research it too because
I bet you'll have some surprises. Sorry, Jenna.
Because like I said, I just blame everything. Right. I just blame everything on anxiety. So that's the
that's what we've been conditioned to do because we've had anxiety we've been told we just have anxiety our whole lives because that was the comfy disclaimer in the 2010s. Yep. And now we're realizing there's a lot of layers and facets to it. And I would have never really fully gone through with this had my therapist not been like, you should probably get tested. Because I knew it in the back of my mind for the last 18 months, but she was like, girl, get you tested.
Real quick, our pediatrician asked if we had a family history and I was like, not diagnosed. And she was like, so who do you think? And I was like, oh, my mom and then my husband. And like, of course I didn't like blame myself. I was like, it's all them.
God, no, you don't talk about that. No, it's all them. It's their bad genes. Ew, no.
It's not me.
It's definitely straight down you. You're the lightning rod of this.
I probably am. So.
Okay, so that being said, and this couldn't be more relevant to the end of this topic, don't forget to
call your therapist
and take your meds.